We are happy that you found us. Today's session is Shifting Gears. We'll be talking about transition services during COVID. My name is Bonnie Thompson. I work for Family Ties at the Federation, and I'd like to introduce to you today the presenters. We have Leslie, and Nancy Mader. Leslie works at the Federation as a project director for MassPAC and Apple projects. She brings a wealth of experience supporting CPACs and program administrators. And Nancy Mader is the Director of Community Support Services at Easter Seals of Massachusetts. She was the prior Director of Transition Projects at the Federation. Both Leslie and Nancy have a deep well of advocacy experience and are here to share their transition knowledge with us today. I will pass it over to you, Nancy and Leslie, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so today we're talking about transition. Leslie and I spent 4 years together with our backs to each other talking about transition. And when I was asked to talk about transition, I was like, I can't do this without Leslie. So we put something together for all of you. We tried to do it around COVID-19 and how everything is so different and murky right now. So this is what we're going to talk about. So what we want you to learn here is leave here with a basic understanding of transition and students' rights. So we're going to start there, and we're going to move down this list here. Then we want you to get some tools and resources to use at home during remote learning. We have those embedded here in our presentation, and we also made a PDF. And if you don't have that PDF right now, we'll get it to you. It's a big list of resources for you to access for students you're working with or students you have at home. And then what to be aware of regarding transition during remote learning. There are things that aren't happening that need to happen. There are some things that are just confusing when school's in normal session that we want to remind you to make sure those things are happening. Okay, so if you guys could put in the chat one thing that you want to learn from this workshop. We're going to try our hardest to leave 15 minutes at the end for talking about for doing questions. Sorry, I meant to start a timer because Leslie and I just talk so long, it's ridiculous. But if you could put that stuff in the chat, we can hopefully go through questions and go through some of that as well. So what is transition planning? It's planning for life after high school. I have always considered it a retirement plan. That's how I think of it. I think of it like a retirement plan. Your student is going to retire from high school and their life shouldn't stop on that day. They should have other things going on. As they leave there, they should continue on into an adult life of some sort, whatever is a best adult life for them. So under the law, the IEP team should consider academic and non-academic courses. We're going to go through all of these things through a COVID lens. Employment and training opportunities. You should be talking about employment in high school. That should be a major part of transition planning. It shouldn't be something that's talked about when they turn 18 and they leave high school. It shouldn't be something that you talk about when they turn 22 and leave high school. It should be talked about when they turn 14. And under the law, I believe it says, and when appropriate, independent and community living. And I am sorry, it is always appropriate to talk about independent and community living. So we're going to talk about these things in more depth as we move through this presentation. So who is eligible for transition services? In Massachusetts, students on IEPs starting at the age of 14. Students, when they turn 14, should start coming to their IEP meetings, and even before that. My son is 9, and I have him make an appearance at all of his IEP meetings because I think it's really important for him to understand that he, one, is on an IEP, that he receives special education services, and why, what accommodations he's getting. So hopefully each year he understands that a little bit better, but definitely start at age 14. So they have to have an IEP Kids on a 504 plan do not get transition services. And any type of disability, it's not discriminate. There's no discrimination on disability for transition services as long as they're on an IEP. And why is transition important? So I have been working in this field for almost 20 years, and these numbers have not changed. And I think that is just terrifying. So transition services are supposed to help make these numbers better, because we're going to start talking about employment. We're going to skill build. We're going to independent living skill build, so that these employment numbers, which are so drastically terrible, so about 30% of our individuals with disabilities are employed. That is not okay. That means they're living under the poverty line. That means they're living on federal and state benefits when many of them could be employed. So the idea behind transition planning is to hopefully in high school give them as many skills as possible to hopefully live an independent life. Financially independent life falls right into that category.
I think this is where we're switching over.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to let Nancy know when I want to change slides, because only one person I think can do this.
Yes.
Welcome everyone. I'm Leslie, and I'm just so glad people are here today. We have a lot of surrogate parents here today, and working with students who are in state custody, and how important it is for them to engage with their student and to talk about transition and what these young people want to do with their lives. It's driven, there's my pup today. It's driven by student vision and what they want to do, and they should be the ones leading the discussion. And I think it's so important to involve a young person early on in this whole process, so that we are starting to listen to them and taking direction from them, and working with their strengths, preferences, and interests. And this is going to be so much fun because my dog wants to go out. So it's really, talking to these young people and asking them questions and trying to get a sense of direction. And it may be unrealistic, and that's okay, but it gives us the place to start and to just start doing that exploration. That's so important around, what do they want to do, getting them involved, getting them to start doing some of those research. And for me, it's always like, you talk to a young person, they're like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know. So start with things that they like to do. What do they like to do for fun? And that can be the springboard to more discussion, better discussion, and even some exploration. So we're going to switch to the next slide. Figure this out.
Oops. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. So we're going to talk about these three areas: education, employment, and community and independent living, because that's the area of, that's what IDEA says, is we should be preparing young people for life after high school with these three approaches. So IEPs are all still in place, regardless of whether you're in hybrid or remote learning. I think everyone needs to, whether they're a parent or a surrogate parent, you need to work with the school district to talk about this special education learning plan of how IEPs are going to be delivered in this current setting. So it may look different. Community placements may be closed. So we have to figure out how are we going to get the students to get the same transition services within this new environment. Just so everybody knows that it might include COVID Compensatory Services, and there's a full advisory out on that. But that might be part of the discussion, is what did the student miss in the springtime that we need to kind of address and maybe make up in the fall going into the school year here. Transition skills can happen in this remote environment. It just needs to be addressed, and sometimes thinking outside the box. We know that students in the first 4 years of high school should be working on academics. That's really the focus, because we want them to have the best possible opportunity to get a state standard diploma. So to figure out whether your student is on track to graduate, look at the high school handbook, which is usually online. It'll tell you what courses the student has to take to graduate from that high school. We know also that the student has to pass the 10th grade MCAS to get a state standard diploma. And I think we put the link here to find out about those COVID compensatory services. You want to talk about some of the resources you've listed here, Nancy?
Yep. So we have, these are resources around exploring post-secondary education. The MyCap is something that all students should be using, in my opinion. It's a really interesting way to keep track of what classes you've taken, what classes you need to take, and it's very geared towards kids going to college. Think College is a great website. It's dedicated to developing, expanding, and improving inclusion in higher ed for people with intellectual disabilities. So if you have a student who has an intellectual disability that wants a college experience, starting with Think College, looking that over, the MACI programs that we have here in Massachusetts are really great resources, and give those students an opportunity to have a college experience. And I think that's amazing. Off to College helps find college. It's a planning tool, and it helps search for colleges that best meet your needs. And then the College Scoreboard, it researches colleges and universities for the right fit. So these are, you can pick which one is easiest for you to navigate. So check them all out, see which one fits your student or the way you think. I think that's always the best way to use resources. If it's hard for you to navigate, you're probably not going to continue to use it. So employment and training. Schools don't like to talk about employment and training. It's outside of their comfort zone. But there's a lot of things that can happen in school that aren't directly talking about employment and training. Interviewing. So interviewing could be for employment and training and or college interviews if someone's going on to college. So, you know, speech therapy can be focused around that. There's so many things. Instead of writing a paper, have somebody write a resume. Have them write paragraphs for their college applications. There's so many ways here that aren't just like, okay, we want the school to find this student an internship, drive them to that internship and monitor them there, because you're not likely to get something like that. You might, but you're not likely to. But creating experiences that those skills can be transferred over to career and post-secondary education in creative ways where the student, you know, learns what their accommodations are. So when they go to a job, they can say what they need. I need this accommodation and here's why. That's an enormous skill, and it takes years to build that. And it can't start the day before they're graduating from high school or leaving high school. It needs to be talked about all the way through high school so that they've mastered it. And they can go to college, they can go to a MACI program, they can go to a job, they can start services with the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission or community-based aid program through DESE, and have the skills where they can advocate for themselves. They know what their accommodations are because they've worked on that in high school.
So I think it's also, Nancy, celebrating that the student has a vision to want to work. And if you look at PLEP B on the IEP page, you can check off a box around helping that student develop some vocational skills.
Absolutely.
For students that might be in state custody and kind of accessing an internship or a part-time job outside of in the community might be difficult, they can still work on employment within the school environment. They can work at a school store. They can manage the yearbook, be the photographer. They can, you know, work with a coach to manage a sports team. There's so many opportunities to explore work and get work-related skills even within a high school environment. So, you know, Nancy's always talk about work. Yes, we need to talk about work with young people. And she's got all of these great resources on the next slide. Someone was just asking in the chat, you know, you're going so fast. We are going to give you a PDF page with all of these links so that you'll be able to explore all of the websites that we're
yes. You will have all this
talking about. Yeah,
we promise you. So one of the things that students with disabilities, any disability, they don't have to have an IEP, they don't have to have a 504, they just have to have a documented disability. They can engage in what is called pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services. that are provided by the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. And what they've done is they have a network of vendors throughout the state that are linked to high schools. These are free for students, free for schools, and it's a great way to start talking about employment on top of the other things that students might be doing in school. Right now, they're all virtual. Many times they happen within school hours. And some of the agencies, like the Easter Seals, we run free ETS programs. We connect a certain number of students with internships in the summer, and many times those internships turn into employment. So here are the resources for career exploration. ONA is a wonderful resource. I love it. I've been using it for years. It is a list of every job you could possibly think of. You put it in the search nurse. Let's say we're going to search nurse. It would come up with nurse, describe it, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the individual needs for that, the education, the pay rate, if it's a growing field or a declining field. And then it also provides jobs that are similar to that job. So like a CNA, a physician's assistant, other things around that, a phlebotomist. There's other things around nursing that a student might not know about, and then they can research this field. There's also a free career interest inventory within the ONET that is for readers and non-readers. So many people can engage with that. One of the other things that's amazing here is the career one-stops in Massachusetts. They're called Mass Hire. They're all called Mass Hire. For years, they all had different names, but now they fall under one name. They're free. They provide career training and job search. They help individuals with their interviewing, resumes. They have, many times they have open interviewing sessions. Employers might hire on the spot. So they're a wonderful resource if you guys can engage in those or get your young people to engage in those. They have youth programming and they're federally funded. To the next slide here.
So I love the concept of working with our young people so that they can really be embedded into our communities, because we're all community members and community players. And this is an area where you think that maybe schools, are not involved in skill building. And to me, all of the skills that students learn in school that are, documented on their IEP should be transferable into the community. And so providing opportunities for students to test those skills is really the measure of, are we learning, in school, the appropriate stuff to be able to be a functioning adult in our communities. So even though community-based placements may be closed, and the types of opportunities that were originally outlined on the IEP is like, how can we do this differently? We've all switched into this Zoom platform. So how do we maybe have a student access some of the community-based participation through Zoom? I know there are Zoom meetups happening for young people so they can, practice their social skills. There are opportunities to participate in learning online, through your local library or, another venue, so that you can start to, learn to participate and to be an active learner in your community. Our library has reopened in my community. So I really think it's a great skill for someone to have to independently go in and check out some material that they're interested in, a video or a book or, something else. These are all ways that you can practice the skills that should be taught in a school environment in your community. And so that way you're learning and growing and making new connections, because you meet people in the community and you start to have these connections. Financial literacy, so key. Can a student use a debit card successfully in their community? Do they know how to budget a little bit so that they can use the funds that they have available? Talking to young people about money is really important. It's almost as important about talking to them about work. We're going to talk about this a little bit further, but the understanding their healthcare needs. so key. They're prompted probably in a school environment to come down to the nurse's office, take some medication. But once they leave this very supportive school environment, can they manage their healthcare needs? Can they talk to a physician about, their concerns and their needs, and be as independent as possible? I think that's what all of transition should be focused on, is getting the young person to be as independent as possible. Recreation, how important is that? We all do something that is for fun, and we meet people and we make connections, and it helps us after a hard day's work to relax and take a hike or join a game or do online gaming. My sons are big into online gaming, and they've met so many interesting people there and made those connections. This works for them. So all of that stuff. And Nancy's going to talk about safety and the internet presence, because I think that's another concern we all have.
Well, I think a lot of it too is we have to take our own preconceived thoughts out of some of these things. Like, you and I never would have met anybody on a video game chat room, Leslie. And so it's scary to us, but that's the world that we live in now. And so we have to make sure that they're safe. We want them to understand what their online footprint looks like, that somebody who says they're 15 on the other end of a chat might not be a 15-year-old person, that we don't meet people in the real world that way. We don't meet them online and then go, to a different state to meet them in real life. So understanding their social media footprint also includes what they put out there. Employers Google you, and they can see, if you don't have a private account, they can see everything that you've put out there. And kids are, let's see here, they don't know long-term consequences, right? And they're impulsive. And so we need to have those conversations with them. I mean, look at how many athletes have been drafted to a professional sport, and someone's gone back 10 years on their Twitter and they put something stupid on there 10 years ago because they never thought about the future. So had someone said something to them then they might not have done it, and they might not be having to talk about something they did when they were 12 or 14 or whatever it is. So talking to them about their footprint there is really important. But there are online groups for individuals with disabilities. The ARC is running groups. The Community for Community Inclusion here put together a whole advisory on it, and they put together some wonderful things at the ICI that people should engage with and look over and share with people, because they're very informative, they're easy to read, and they're timely. Let's see here, there we go. So here are some more resources. So connecting with your independent living center is a very easy thing for individuals to do. There are 11 of them across the state, I believe. They're free. All you have to do is identify as an individual with a disability, and you can receive free services. They all do something different, so you'll want to look at what they provide at the independent living center closest to you, but they might have youth groups, they might have educational programs that an individual you're working with or thinking about might engage in. They do a lot of self-advocacy and empowerment programming for individuals with disabilities so that they understand the laws that they are living under, what laws benefit them, how to advocate for better engagement with their local Congress people and state reps so that they can be better represented. And this presidential year, our newly elected president actually talked about individuals with disabilities in his acceptance speech, which was the first time that's ever happened. And so their outreach and their advocacy through things like independent living centers, mass advocates standing strong, the Easter Seals, YLN, all of these programs have driven that. So they do have a voice, and they need to continue to get stronger voices if that's possible.
What's so interesting, though, is these young people have to learn self-advocacy. It doesn't organically just happen, and they have to practice. So trying to find ways within a school environment, even putting it on the IEP, that the student must meet with each one of their teachers, like every semester, to talk about, gee, what's working for them in their class, and where are they struggling, and how can they get an accommodation, even in a remote environment? You know, what for the student, just even to know what accommodations they're receiving
Right.
for each of their classes is so important, because it empowers them to say, this is an area where I struggle with, and here's how you can help me. And they're going to have to do that in a job environment, in a college, you know, community college, a college environment. They're going to have to move out into the community with skills to say, these are some of my challenges, but here's how I've been able to work successfully and overcome that. And that's so important to practice. And there's lots of ways, you know, they can get connected. One of the things that we have as a resource at the Federation are these transition brochures. And Nancy created all of these. So we have Nancy to say thank you to. Yeah. My favorite one is the brochure. They're downloadable as PDFs on our website, is the self-determination one. And it talks about strategies that you can do in school and at home to get your young person to start to, you know, become that self-advocate, to start practice decision-making now, and to start, you know, doing some of those things to advance what they want to do. And if it's led by them, I think that's just so more empowering for them. But it's a skill they have to practice.
Right. And they also have to have buy-in, I think, is a really important aspect of this too. They have to believe in it. You know, you can fight for a law for, you know, to protect something that you don't really care about, and your fight's going to probably drizzle out. But if you can come up with something, some kind of way for them to advocate for themselves where they see how it empowers them, they're going to keep working on it, and they're going to see the benefits of it. So things to consider during COVID. I'll let you take this.
Okay, so just remember that this is a challenging time, not only for students, for families, but for educators and all the related service providers. So they're figuring out these new platforms. It's just not a switch that you kind of switch and you go from, I'm going to Classroom to Zoom or to Google Classroom or whatever workspace they're in. It's a trial and error a little bit, and it's what's working. And so I think that's where we talk about that regular two-way communication back and forth, so that people are communicating what's working for them and what's not. Knowing that opportunities right now in the community may be limited. We may be closing down more venues, and if a student had a part-time job even in the community, it might change even in the next couple of months. So you know, we just need to figure out, is there another way to do this? And I think people come up with creative ideas and bring more people into the discussion, because more people have more ideas. So you know, it's always talking about getting a community of support around a young person so that there's more involvement and interest and ideas in the room. You know, ask what you can do to help. You know, keep that dialogue happening with the educator also, especially if you're in a surrogate parent position. You know, how do you support the student, talking to whoever's in their group home, talking to their educators, talking to the guidance counselor. I'm talking about involving more people to support that student, because it's difficult for the students. You know, try to provide as much information on what's happening for that student and what some of those challenges are, and you know, getting that involvement happening, and maybe making something happen that you didn't think could happen. So here's a student who might be living in a group home, or a student that's kind of accessing education remotely. Is there a way that they could talk to somebody about maybe a job that they're interested in? How can you create that online interview with a local restaurant owner, or somebody who owns a store, or somebody who fixes bicycles for a living, and the student is really an avid bicyclist? You know, make those connections remotely. And then when we can go back in person, they can fulfill that by visiting that person. So it's always trying to keep the learning going on, even though it's changed, our environments have changed.
Significantly. I mean, you guys, I'm married to a PE teacher who teaches gym class out of our kitchen, and it's a wild house I live in right now. So everything is a lot of change and a lot of being creative with how we approach working with individuals with special needs.
So I found though that there's a whole lot available online, all of this YouTube channeling. You can find a video about almost anything you're interested in, learn about it, maybe even connect to the person who did the video, ask them questions, create your own video. There's just so much happening that
Absolutely.
we have to look at, these are the possibilities that are happening online that we never had before.
Well, and another push for getting your students that you're working with or your students at home engaged in the pre-ETs is they were given money through the federal government to buy equipment and software for remote learning. So there's like virtual job shadowing platforms. So you can virtually job shadow something you might be interested in. They got a lot of software and different things for students to engage in remotely around work that are really interesting and I think are going to really benefit students, things that we didn't have before. So be aware of that, and if you can get them engaged with pre-EDs, I just think it's really beneficial.
And best thing is we don't have to drive them there.
I know, God, it's crazy.
How many times did you sit in the car and wait for the...
Well, I'm doing that now for after school program in a field across town. So I just sit in the car. Everything.
Some of the benefits.
Yeah.
So transition has got to go on, and we just need to think outside the box.
Yep. And you can do these things at home. I know that we're working with kids here who don't maybe have great home lives, or are everything is harder for these guys. They have a disability, and then there's some reason why they're under the state guidance. So thinking about things that we can help them with either remotely, or if you do see them in person, having them engage in things that will build skills for them when, because this will end and we all will, slowly come back into school and our workplaces. And if we can help them build skills, like Leslie said, engaging with an employer through a virtual interview, it's a great thing for someone to be able to do at home. And it might be someone that that you can set them up with. That's something that can happen through you to help them build skills. If they apply for a job, having them call you to follow up, to practice that follow-up call to the employer to see if they got their application. So there's some things that we as the community who help these young people can do to help them continue to build skills while they're not in the school building.
I'm even looking for a student who might be in a group home, and can that student help plan the meals for a week and arrange the shopping list and organize who's going to do the prep work and the cleanup work. I mean, that I could see a student putting that on their resume, that they are, on a weekly basis, plan a meal for 10 students and, do the budgeting and do the, purchasing. And, that's a skill. That's a skill, organization, executive function. It's all how we look at things. And so just creating opportunities within whatever current environment we're in, I think is the way to be successful. I don't know what our next slide is, Nancy.
Let's see. So this is a document. This is actually a tool set. It's called Charting the Life Course Planning Tool. This can be used for anyone at any age. And it's a really great document, or great toolkit. It's a kit, I would say. I got to stop saying document. And it's free. And it helps you, it talks a lot about a trajectory. So you can talk to a student about what they want their life to look like and, how they're going to get there, or what they don't want their life to look like. I think that's equally an important question. So if you're working with a student who doesn't want to be in day hab, they want to be in community-based day programs, they want to be out in their community, they want to engage in that community, not go to another setting that's so much like school, and how do they get there? Do they have to, really work on behaviors that they can't do this in public? They're doing it in school, and school's a very protected environment for so many kids. And when they leave it, it's a really hard dose of reality. Kids that go on to college, there's so much free time at college. You're so independent there. There's no IEP. So this is something that can help map out what students, the people who are helping these students, families, and the agencies working with them can help them to reach their goals. And it talks about a lot of different things. So daily life and employment, community living, healthy living, safety and security, social and spirituality, advocacy and engagement. So it talks about more things than like the transition planning form through DESE. This is more in depth. You're digging a little bit more here.
I think this is where we start talking about building that community around the student. Yes. I always found that even with my own sons, that other people saw their strengths and skills differently than I did as a parent, and bringing those people on board, whether it be a coach, a scout leader, a community leader, in a group that my sons were involved with, and what their perspective was and
Right.
how they interacted with a young person. I think it's just a nice way these are tools to kind of open your eyes to say, oh, we haven't involved this kind of concept into it. How big technology is playing in the world now. Is there an assistive technology tool that can help your young person plan their day, organize their life, help them read, help them calendar? And there's so many things out there, and they're all new. They're all
Right.
relatively new. I think one nice thing about Easter Seals is it's has two, help me Nancy, they're the assistive technology centers where you can
Yep.
learn about these tools and actually borrow them.
Borrow them for free, whether you have a disability or not. Some of them are a 2-week lend, some of them are a 4-week lend. And you can see if they work for you before investing in them, see if they work for your young person before investing in them. We also have money loan programs around more expensive technologies. This is also something that can happen through the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. They do a lot around independent living. I think what I like the most about like this integrated support star, Leslie, is that it talks about community-based supports. So there's eligibility specific. So your Department of Developmental Services, your mass rehabs, your Department of Mental Health, where you have to be deemed eligible for those services. This talks about community-based supports because the state agencies cannot do everything, and they're never going to. They're going to be restricted by dollars. They're going to be restricted by services they can provide, vendors they contract with. There's so many things once you get into the adult agency world that they're just tell you they can't do. Where if you start thinking about community-based services with the people you're working with, thinking about when they leave high school, what will they need outside of this? This state agency is going to support them here. What else do they need? So do they love the theater, so engaging in a theater program in their town where somebody who's a part of that theater picks them up and they go to practice for their play or their choir, or if they love gaming or science fiction or whatever it is, can we find those supports in the community, connect them before they leave high school? So when they leave high school, not everything is new and they're starting all over again. They're feeling lost. But if they can start engaging in that in high school, so it's a smoother transition out, they're not leaving everything behind and then starting new. They're leaving some things behind and continuing on with others.
And it might just be making friends. Our local like toy store had a night where they came in and they painted those little figures and did those war games or whatever they do. But if you attended that program, you met people who had similar likes that you had. You could have conversations, you could practice your social skills, and you made a friend in your community who you could maybe do something else with. It's really leaving school can be very isolating. And so how do we keep our young people active in the community, maybe doing some volunteer work, making those connections, which might lead to other connections. And it's really thinking about, okay, based on their interests, what do they want to do? Can I help them find something that's available, and how can they get to it? To be able to make those connections, to keep active, to keep making friends. I mean, I think the biggest challenge for a lot of young people is that they are still living at home and they don't have as many connections to other young people.
Yep. So I like this document and this system for thinking about those other things. And it's all around like personal strengths and relationships. I just think this is the best part of this toolkit, is this looking at it through this lens of what do they need? What do they have? Where do we need to look for other things for them?
And I think it's really important for us as adults supporting young people to really embrace their interests and to kind of, be their cheerleader and say, yeah, I think one thing that we try at the Federation is to help families and people working with young people set very high expectations for these young people and saying, yeah, I think you could do that. Let's try it. And you learn, even if it doesn't work, you learn from that. So setting high expectations for our young people, making opportunities available for them to test their ideas, to test their interests. And then that way you're not the person saying, well, no, I don't think that's good for you. Let that young person figure it out on their own. And that's really supporting them enough so that they have the experience, and you're there when, to fall back on in case it doesn't work. And we all learn so much from our mistakes or missteps along the way.
And they deserve to have those. And what did Adam say at PAL one year? There's dignity in failure. I think my greatest learning experiences were from failing from something, right? And so they deserve that. Do we set them up for it? No. Do we know it might be coming? Yes. Are we there when it happens and help them learn from it and unpack it some so that, they can see what they might like more or what they learned from it. And failing at a job is okay because it might lead you to another one where you're like, I didn't like this piece of that job, but I liked this piece and I'm going to go for this job. This was what I was good at there. So there's a lot of learning that we can do with our young people when they fail, equally as when they succeed, unpacking that as well. But these documents kind of help you go through those things. So I really encourage you to look at them and use them. They don't all have to be used. You can pick which ones you like, which ones you don't like, and do some reading up on it.
And these are nice. There's a lot of tools within there to fill in the blanks, to kind of map out the steps. It helps you organize, because a lot of transition can be overwhelming. It's like, where do I start? What do I do? So having a tool kind of sets you on the path to a structure to address some of these issues.
Yep. So when we were putting this together, we didn't have this slide on here. And as Leslie and I were going through it, we were like, we got to talk about important milestones. One thing that was missed at the end of last year that was giving me heart palpitations were Chapter 688 referrals were down like 75%. And I was like sweating over this. I think that they're back up. I don't know if they're back up to as high as they were pre-COVID, but schools have finally figured out how to get the Chapter 688 referrals to the adult agencies. So let me go back a little bit. So a Chapter 688 referral is a way to help adult agencies, schools, and families identify and plan ahead for the needed adult services for students with severe disabilities. If you're working with a student who will need lifelong services, if they have an intellectual disability, if they have autism with no intellectual disability but will need lifelong services, then the Department of Developmental Services is most likely their adult agency that will help them navigate life throughout it. So, help them with a job, help them with independent living, whatever it might be. There's the Department of Mental Health, There's Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. Both of those agencies are rehabilitative agencies. They're not technically designed to serve individuals from birth to death, like a DDS is, like a Massachusetts Commission for the Blind or the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Those are birth to death agencies. The idea behind DMH and MRC is to give them the skills to move on. Does that always happen at DMH? No. But Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission is supposed to be short term. Some people are very engaged for a long time before they become employed, but those are all agencies that a 688 referral can go to. So if you are the person helping decide the IEP with the IEP team, which agency this young person is going to need, DCF is also a 688 agency. Think about that student and think about their life outside of high school and what kind of supports they're going to need around independent living and around work and around relationships with people outside of, you know, in the community, with their family, all of those things. And think about the agency that they're going to need. The IEP team agrees on it. The student or the guardian or the parent signs that 688 referral and it goes to that agency. The most important thing to think about here is that it is not an application. You still have to apply to all of these agencies for adult services. And this will happen about 2 years before the student leaves high school. They must have an IEP to get a 688 referral. 504 kids don't get 688 referrals, but this helps the state plan, one, financially for students coming through, and it helps the agencies know how many young people are going to be coming in new, so they can plan staffing, they can plan services, they can plan their finances around what young people they will now be serving into adulthood. And we made a brochure. There's a brochure for everything, you guys. There's literally a brochure for everything.
I need a brochure for my life, Nancy.
I know. I'll write one for you. This is a really great brochure to break down the 688 process because it's confusing for everyone. And so if your school's not handling it right, my advice to you is to take this to them and say, this was written with DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. This is what should be happening. This is what they're saying should be happening. So, I mean, I think that's what I would do with all of these. I love these brochures. Writing them was a chore, but they all came out very useful.
Okay. One of the things I think we all need to think about in this whole transition planning process is when the student will exit high school, public high school, and eligibility for services under the state. So it's when they graduate, and graduate really means two different things. It's really when either a student accepts a state standard diploma or exits at age 22. And so that is an important consideration. It's documented on the IEP, on IEP 8 page, under additional information that the team needs to discuss. What is the student's anticipated date that they will graduate? And I think everyone who's involved in the IEP team should be kind of agreeing on, wow, do we have 4 years to plan for this student to exit, or are we talking 6 or 8 years? And that's a different planning process. To access a state standard diploma, the student needs to complete all of the local course requirements at their high school, and those are identified on the high school handbook online. Usually you can find that. And they also need to pass all 3 of the MCAS tests: English language arts, math, and one of the sciences. And that's the 10th grade level. They can take it again in 11th grade or 12th grade. You can take it up to your age 25, but at some point, you know whether the student is on track to pass MCAS and to move on and get that diploma. Public education is focused to get that student to get that diploma because that opens up more doors on the other side to either jobs or to access a college and pursue a college degree. I just want everyone to know that all students are allowed to participate in high school graduation. That is, a right that they all have. They're all working hard. They're on IEPs. They're working on all of their skills, and they have the right to participate, dress up in the gown, walk down the aisle and get some type of certificate of attendance, even if they're not on track to get a diploma. And they might come back next year and do either a life skills class in the high school, pursue local employment with support, or maybe even attend your local community college in a kind of an inclusive concurrent enrollment program. There's so many opportunities after that, but they have the right to participate in high school graduation. Next, Nancy.
All right.
Turning 18, big shift in all of our thinking and processing. Regardless of the student's disability challenges, at age 18, the state will consider them a legal adult unless there's been help me, guardianship.
Yeah.
The words are failing me today. Unless a guardianship has been put in place. And so this is a key age to start thinking about and planning around, what is the capacity of the young person to make their own decisions and what kind of support will they need. The IEP team will actually talk about it when the student turns 17, so that people who are involved in working with that student have that year to plan in case a guardianship is appropriate. And there's so many new options to support a student around supported decision-making, conservatorship, representative payee. There's a multitude of ways to help the young person who has challenges navigating the adult world short of a guardianship. But this is kind of a touchstone that you have to address it at age 18, because if you haven't gotten a guardianship, that young person at 18 will become the person who actually signs their IEP. They're the legal signer, and they can choose to have a family or a surrogate parent share decision-making. They can delegate decision-making, or they can say, no, I want to make my own decision. So that's why it's discussed by the IEP team. So also the student is aware of what's happening around age 18. There's a whole lot of things to consider at age 18 in terms of shifts of healthcare and, even registering for the draft, so that there is a nice checklist put out by the Autism Housing Pathways, so that hey, at age 18, the student has new rights and responsibilities. They can legally get married. They can vote. I mean, you've got that great photo there, Nancy. They can join the Army.
Yep.
So, it's a big shift, and knowing what you have to do to support a young person at age 18 is key, but there's lots of checklists for you to access and use as a guide.
Yep. So transition assessment and tele-assessment. So these are interesting. So my fourth grader had a tele-assessment, and it was actually an OT assessment, and it went much better than I thought it would. Just because, one, they know what they're doing, and they were able to use technology in a way that I'm not good at that kind of thing. So I think it went really well. Do I want him to have another one in person when school goes back in person? Yes, because he sets up his work much differently in school than he does at home. So this was great for remote learning, but he needs it in person too. So we're putting that off until they're back, and they're, like really back, not just this temporary stuff that is happening all over our country. But transition assessment helps us to inform about post-secondary goals. There isn't a transition assessment, and if someone has that, I wouldn't trust it with anything. Ask questions. What do you want to know about that student? What information are you lacking about that student? So for many years, I did vocational evaluation for the Easter Seals, and school districts would send me students for vocational evaluation with no questions, nothing they wanted to learn. So they just got a general assessment. But some school districts wanted to know information about that student. can they follow multiple step directions in a work setting? And I had them come to me because I wanted them to be uncomfortable. I wanted them to be away from people who knew their strengths, knew their limitations. I wanted to see what they could do without the support of school. So they came to me in downtown Boston. And I did all this testing. But if someone asked questions about them, I could test specifically to answer those questions. And I think it was a much more meaningful report. So if you have any kind of assessments you're thinking of, or what do you want to know about that student will drive the assessment? Can they drive? Would they be a good driver? Can they be a safe driver? Do they have the decision-making skills to be a driver? That's a great question to ask because students, you know, turning a certain age want to be able to drive if their, you know, peers are doing that. Can they work? Can they work more than 3 hours? Can they follow multiple step directions? Whatever it is that you want to know about them, that should drive the assessment process. Also, like what's missing? So what don't we know about them? I think that's a great place to start on whatever their goal is. Do they want to work? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to a tech school? You know, whatever it is, what they want to do after high school, live by themselves. If they want to live independently, do they have the financial skills to do that? Do they have the safety skills? How are they going to get around? Those are great questions to ask to start with assessment. And right now you can, whoever is in charge of the students, you know, educational process, you can e-signature or you can use an email for consent. You don't have to go somewhere and sign a document like you usually do. So health independence, incorporating health independence into the IEP is something we started talking about a few years ago. So if anyone wants to, if you have a student who wants to live an independent life and they have a lot of medical complications or take a medication or, you know, going to the doctor, really every student needs this, right, Leslie? Like I need it as a 43-year-old person. Like I just let someone pick my doctor for me based on location because I'm lazy and no one ever taught me this stuff. So I don't even think about it, but thinking about finding a doctor that best meets your needs is something that can be talked about in school and really worked on in school. And all students need this. If they're going to college and they're leaving the pediatrician that they've always known, they're going to have to know that if they get sick there, they're going to have to either go to the college doctor, medical center.
Health center. That
right.
Wonderful little health center you go to.
Right. Or like an urgent care, you know? Yep. So it's going to be different. What do they know about themselves? Do they know if they have an allergy to a medication? There's so much information that parents just know about their kids that kids don't know about themselves before they, you know, go off into the world. So healthcare transition is so important and should definitely be a part of the IEP. So if they're going to go to work, there isn't a nurse in the school office who gets an alarm on their watch to take them down their medication. You know, that's something that can be written into the IEP. That student knows between these two classes, they go take their medication. You know, whatever it is, like start incorporating those skills, especially young people with significant mental health issues, understanding why they take the medication that they take and what are the consequences of them going off that medication, because that's something that happens frequently when kids go off to college or when kids leave high school or the home.
Well, I also look at it, they have such a structured life when they're in a school environment, even in a remote environment, start and stop. When they leave this school environment, it's very kind of loose, open, and they've got to create their own structure. And healthcare has got to be incorporated into all of this. So it's about 11:15, Nancy. I don't know where we are on our slides.
We've got our transition timelines here, which Leslie and I both love.
The best one is the ARC of Massachusetts. Google their transition timeline. It starts at 13, goes to like 22 and above. And it really helps you focus on what are the skills my student needs to have when they're 14. It's different. You know, you don't have to work worry about, can they cook their own meals at 14, or, can they drive? Because that's not going to happen till later. So put you in the frame of mind of what are the skills that student needs at any given time, and you can kind of see if your student's on track to get those skills. Love
And
timeline.
planning ahead. What do they need next year? What do they need the following year? So it's not sneaking up on you. And it's not so overwhelming like the books, like the new mom books, where, everything seems like your child's probably never going to do anything and you just have to throw those away. These are like common sense lists that are very doable. And if you're working with several students, the ARC one, not everything in there is going to pertain to your students, but it's a nice way to look into the future and see what's coming up and things to think about. I think, Leslie, we did it.
Oh, we did it. So I just want everyone to know that we have our emails here. You can email us with questions. We've also created a PDF document of all the links that you saw in this presentation that we're going to share with you, so that you'll have a way to actively, with your computer, click on the link. So it's a little easier rather than working off of the PowerPoint handout. So that will be available hopefully through this platform. If not, you can get it from us, because I've been frustrated trying to get to links and copying things and it not working. So we'll have that available. The one question I did see in the chat that, Bonnie, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in because it's one of my favorite ones, is, here's a question of, is a kid ready for college? Do we have that college readiness assessment? And I'm like, there is no such thing. No kid in America is ready for college, I really think. And I think there's ways that I used as a parent to kind of get myself ready, because I knew my kids would have challenges there. So one of the things is, can you send them to a camp that's maybe on a college campus, so that they have to live in a dorm, know that they have to take their shampoo to go to the bathroom down the hall if they want to shower, and they have to find the cafeteria to eat. So can you go to a camp on a college campus? We went to sports camps on college campuses. So my son had experience in multiple college campuses, so that when we went to look at schools, he's like, oh, I really don't want a big campus. I want a small environment, or I want it to have a track facility so I can run in a safe, lighted place. All of these things is because he had experience. Can you send your young person to a community college class? Yes, they'll take your money. So, as a junior or over the summer, they can sign up for a community college class. They can audit it. They can take the placement test and see how they're doing. These are ways for you to get information to inform you, your IEP team, and the student are they ready for school? Community colleges, Nancy and I can't say enough about how wonderfully they help students with disabilities. You self-identify, you work with the Office of Accessibility Services or Disability Services, and start to navigate on your own while still living at home. And you can always transfer into a four-year college. So there's lots of ways for you to assess, is a student ready for college? Start the process slower, but is there one test that you can take to see if your student's ready? No.
No, and sometimes the outside vendors do a good job with transition assessment around college readiness. They ask questions of the teachers, wherever they're living, individuals in their home, and the student, and they can kind of help the school plan for them, some transition experiences in high school to prepare them for college. I mean, like Leslie said, the reality is no one's ready for college. I highly recommend that they don't go too far from home. It's hard, and then when you're a plane ride from home, or a long drive, and you can't just come home or have someone come and visit you, I think that's even harder for individuals, one with disabilities, and a lot of our students have mental health issues that make everything even more difficult.
So part of that is figuring out as a family. We drew a circle around our home of 2-hour drive of where we could kind of assist our young people as they navigated all this world and within a 2-hour drive. Also to start to talk to the disability offices. What do you need to qualify for accommodations in a college environment? You don't take your IEP into a college environment. So the student really should be doing some research, going online, looking at their websites, asking, can I talk to another student who maybe has a disability like mine, and how they're accommodated in that environment? You know, talking to a peer. Lots of ways to learn about schools before you even apply, and navigate into those systems. So that's a whole nother workshop that Nancy and I have done over the years.
Yes.
Of, like, you know, going to college. And there's so many more interesting opportunities, even for a student who is not on a track to graduate, that they can participate in the Massachusetts Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment Program. And while they're 18 to 22, take a class at their local state college or community college, be in a supportive program, get a peer mentor, and learn with their typical age peers and practice those social skills in those environments. Lots of things happening. I think we all just need to start asking questions of what are our options, you know, what are the opportunities?
Yep.
Are there any more questions in the chat, Bonnie, that you see?
I did not see any more questions in the chat, but I did want to mention that your presentation slides are available at the bottom of the session description. And then you'll be sending out the PDF you said with the links, or those are included in the PowerPoint?
Renee has
Hopefully
it.
they're included. So.
Yeah, Renee has it, and we can send it again in case it
Yeah.
didn't go out.
Okay, and Leslie and Nancy shared their email addresses, so anybody wants to reach out to them if they don't receive it. So great. Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate hearing from Nancy and Leslie and their expertise in transition. I think that within the chat, the evaluation link was included. If you could please fill out the evaluation, it helps our TSC and the planners to know how to move forward with planning for our next conference. So thank you, Leslie and Nancy.
Before you exit out, because we go till 11:30. So I just wanted to make sure that people also check out the Easter Seals website, and they have information and resources available there. They have youth groups that are now meeting virtually. So there's lots of opportunities for youth to get involved and to try something out, you know, join a youth group. They're doing martial arts virtually at Easter Seals. So that, you know, you can practice your skills in your living room via Zoom. You know, there's so much there that we just are touching, you know, on today. The Federation also has a website that is called the Link Center. That's where you'll find all of those brochures, lots more resources around transition.
Translated into 5 languages.
Yes, we have at our annual conference, which is right now scheduled for Saturday, March 6th, 2021. It seems so far away, but it'll be there soon. We're partnering with Easter Seals, and they're going to be running our 2 youth forums. There's one that's focusing on students to really work on their self-advocacy skills and maybe, you know, helping them reach out into their community to find a community environment that works for them. And then there's one that's focusing on students that might be moving on to go into a community or a 4-year college or some other kinds of formal educational training. So there's 2 strands, and our young people can join that conference and, you know, meet some people, have some experience, and learn a little bit during the day. So that's coming up on March 6th. There'll be more information on the Federation's website about that. We've always had great participation, and it's just so nice working with Easter Seals, because they get kids, they get youth, and they have a nice programming platform that students can then transition into.
Absolutely. And we also, just so you know, this is something that we also do. This is through the Department of Developmental Services, most specifically for students with autism, no intellectual disability. We have college navigators. So the service cliff for students from high school to college was something that the Easter seals recognized. Students with disabilities graduate about 40%, where students, their non-disabled peers, about 60% of students who start college graduate with a degree. It's a huge difference. So we started this pilot program for DDS, serving students with autism, no intellectual disability, who are in college. We've had kids graduate, and now it's going to be a program that DDS fully funds going forward. We have applied for the statewide contract, so hopefully we get that. But this provides services beyond what a disability services office can provide, because they can't serve everyone. And they're just limited. And so a student gets a college navigator who's someone who recently graduated from college. Right now, all of our services are virtual, and that's the student's choice, mostly just because they don't need any more adults entering their lives, to keep them safe. But when college is regular, our navigators look like college students, and they're recent graduates, and they have that experience is very fresh for them, helping kids connect to services on campus, social outings, and just different things, how to organize their time. I mean, that's hard for everyone. I got to college and I was like, I have like 30 hours free that I've never had before. And so I took a lot of naps and stuff.
So
and got chubby.
Doesn't it function like a check-in? So the navigator's going to check in with them, maybe have a coffee if it's in person.
Yeah, and we spend time with them. So we help them lay out their calendar, how to pick which classes that they got. You're not a morning person. Why are you signing up for this 8 a.m. class that you're going to miss all the time? Because these are conversations that people don't have, because a lot of times kids want to be independent, and so they sign up for, well, this is the only time they have that class. Well, next semester, let's ask when they have it next semester, because it might be in the afternoon then. So those things that are hard to know how to navigate, especially your freshman year and even your sophomore year. But those are through DDS. So if you're working with students who are coming close to graduating, who are most likely going to get services from DDS, know that those kinds of services are out there, that has been recognized as a need for students to successfully complete college.
Lindsay, is that available statewide, or
It
is that just
will be.
regionally based?
It will be. Right now it's statewide because it's all virtual, so we can help students statewide, and we do have some statewide students, but it will be statewide, hopefully starting in January.
So for
Excellent.
anyone who's a surrogate parent working with a young person that might be exiting at age 18 out of school or graduating, they really should be made aware of also the supports and services that come through DCF to help those students. So they might be able to get some tuition assistance and even continue to work with their surrogate parent as a support person. So there's lots of different options, and I think you just need to start talking to young people as they kind of exit the system of what kind of supports and services do we need to kind of put in place, or these are the people to call when you kind of stuck or get into a challenge that you can't handle. There's lots of people here to help. And I think that's really, keeping the conversation going with our young people, because it's a challenging world, and there is a lot of support and services. So happy Transition Tuesday, everyone.